We went to Reed and we said, Senator Reed, can you help us? So he did a couple of things. Unified there's three separate sections of river: downtown Reno, the Truckee Meadows, and the lower Truckee Canyon. Well, they made them so that all of those sections could be looked at one time together for the benefit cost calculation. We were thinking that there were excess benefits in the meadows that could be exported to the other two reaches, but as it's turned out, that's not the case. It would also allow us, here's a thought. I mean, we're trying to get innovative. Below city streets, there are water rights. There most certainly are. In Nevada, we're looking at how we can capture and use those and actually turn those into money that we can use for our project. And what we were trying to do is use we figured, that valued at 135, 200 million, that's not right anymore either. But the amount of acre feet that we think we could get at one time, we thought we could get a couple $100 million out of it. But water rights have gone, the value of water has gone way down in the West, at least in Nevada it has. And so there's no longer, but the Corps got around that little legislation by saying you didn't use the Corps Legislative Drafting Service for doing this legislation, and therefore they negated the value of the water. That's why I keep pointing to Washington. We realized that if we wanted to be, and the Corps said, you're going to have one local sponsor for a Corps project. We will not deal with the cities of Reno and Sparks and Washoe County separately. You have to have one. So we knew that we were going to have to basically borrow the authority from Reno and Sparks and Washoe County to charge a fee. And eventually that's what we've decided to do, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We also realized that if we were going to elevate homes, that we would be in the home restoration business for the rest of our natural lives. Can you imagine elevating a house and having it sink an inch and getting a call, my doors won't open? Well, we elevated your house, sorry, that isn't going to fly. So we tried to convert our program into a grant program. Well, the government has a real hard time with a government giving money to a private enterprise in any form or fashion, unless there's some sort of an agreement. And even though pending an agreement, it's still a difficult thing. The Nevada legislature was not willing to do that. We had to go down there and change law, and we did. And then the IRS got us by saying, oh, that grant money that you get, that's income. And Senator Reed is working on a fix for that. These are some of those little hurdles that we've had to overcome. So we initiated a flood funding study in 2008, and we went through and we tried to come up with a bunch of different alternatives, what it was going to cost us. We realized that if we were going to charge a fee, now what's a fee as opposed to a tax? Tax is something any legislature can levy against real property, personal property, whatever they want to levy it against. Sales tax, property taxes, easy to do. There's a lot of authority to do that. A lot of examples of it. Fees, okay, fees. Okay, you can pay a water bill, not a problem. That's easy to do. You can pay a gas bill, pay an electric bill. How and why? Because there's a meter. And on sewage, well, we know that from engineering, we know that there's a certain if you use so much water that you're going to use about that many gallons of wastewater treatment. Again, there's a connection. We were going to try to come up with a very difficult concept of benefit being derived for the benefit of the public, that the roads can stay open, the airport stays open, people can still go to work, the conventions can continue, there's no problem with airplanes landing. All these things are a benefit to the community and it represents an economic amount. The problem is it's very difficult to prove in court. And that becomes one of the lessons learned. If you guys should choose to go that direction, watch us and see if we are able to be successful, and if we are, follow us. If we're not, then run the other direction. Likely estimate, we were going to base it on developed square footage. So a 25,000 square foot building, 2 stories, would pay the same amount as a 150,000 square foot building, because it's again on developed square footage. So the casinos that are in the direct area pay a significant amount And we've got warehouses. Nevada law allows for inventory, and that's one of the ways that we've been able to get business in our state is have favorable inventory laws. Well, Kmart Sears has their 1.5 million square foot warehouse in that flood area, and their bill, problematic, it'd be about $400,000 a month. So we have to fix that. That's something that we're not there yet. We're still working on it. Emphasize the issue of fee versus tax. That is just so critical, and I can talk to those attorneys that may want to talk about that afterward. No successful of implementation of a flood fee to date. There's been a couple of attempts, and they were all struck down. We are going to use two areas to look at our flood fee. A direct benefit area, so if you're in the direct benefit area, you pay a lot more. Time-wise, I'm still doing okay. And then there's a regional benefit area. Can't use the word indirect, it's a no-no, and we're not using that word. But regional benefit, direct benefit, two tiers, and we're going to do it as a flat rate for all residences in either one of the two tiers. And the commercial pays on the basis of developed square footage. Other possible funding, Senator Reed has been helpful to our project. He's been a very good sponsor to us. We have the SNPA money, Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act for Bureau of Reclamation. You know, we're one of those states that's, gosh, we're 80%, 90% owned by the federal government. And so as the Bureau sells off lands, the money then goes towards like Lake Tahoe, our project, that sort of thing. Senator Reed has the Desert Terminus Lakes Fund. Q1 is question 1 bonds, where we actually ask the citizens if they're willing to tax themselves. Federal grants, FEMA hazard mitigation grants. We've been successful. We actually got the first hazard mitigation grant in the state of Nevada that we know of, which is pretty cool. There we go. It's working now. Nature Conservancy has been a wonderful partner, and I can't say enough good things about them. What are the impacts to business? Okay, you know that we've got a flood pool. It's a huge, people refer to it sometimes lovingly as the bathtub, but in all fairness, to an engineer, it's just a real nice detention facility. They're going to require that if we allow developers to impinge upon the project that we build, if we lower our level of protection because of developers or development, then we have to watch that. So we required, we're going to then, as our group is going to have to review development plans to make sure that developers do not collectively impact the facilities that we're looking at building. Again, that's basically the same thing. We've entertained the development of a hydrologic model to be used specifically for that purpose. We also have developed these critical flood zones. So as you recognize, this was the old flood area. The blue is the new flood area. That remains. So any property that's developed in that area has to mitigate for any volume that they put in there. Again, the idea is to not change the service level of the design that we've come up with. These individuals pay, these are in the direct benefit area, these guys, because they'll have to pay, because the fact that they're no longer flooding because of our project, they pay a higher fee for the fee. To do that is a fairly technical approach. These are the storage areas in the HEC RAS model. For those who are familiar with that, it's a hydraulic model, calculates water surface. We were then taking those elevations and we were holding developers to those elevations. So again, the idea was to try to make a repeatable type of a stipulation for the development criteria. Partnership, Reno Sparks Indian Colony actually built the project. Total value about $5.8 million. We only spent $1.7. Lockwood Restoration, 5.8. That's, you notice these are all restoration projects with exception of these two, and they're not built yet. We only spent $22,000. The 102 Ranch Restoration, total cost $6.4 million. We spent nothing. Mustang Ranch, 7.8. We spent nothing. We facilitated those. We helped, but we didn't spend any money. Again, the idea is to try to do this as cheaply as possible, and this is something that I would encourage this group to keep in mind. The North Truckee Drain, this is only design costs. The flood project has only spent about $300,000 of those dollars. Downtown Bridge visioning, again, there was no savings there. The Virginia Street Bridge, again, as I mentioned, it was the one that's falling down. Estimate $29 million. We will give them $13 million, and then they'll build that project. Again, Tracy Restoration, about an $8 million project. That's ongoing, that's not completed. That one's not completed. Sparks, the North Truckee Drain, and the Virginia Street Bridge are not completed. Everything else is. To help sell this, not only, because there are people that are saying, hey, I don't live in the floodplain. I don't care if you don't flood. I don't care. And there's that attitude. You know that we're in Nevada, for crying out loud. But if we're going to put people to work, that entices and encourages people and gives them incentive to want to go that direction, because we're one of the hardest hit states. We certainly have the highest rate of foreclosures. Well, I guess we're tied with, it was Arizona, one of the other ones, I can't remember, but we're always there right on the forefront. You know, Nevada's always considered the best in those kinds of things. Now, for the quick drastic measures by the Corps. The Corps said your BC ratio of this plan, this $1.6 billion, $1.5 billion plan you want to build, the BC ratio is 0.69. It's gone. Sat in Major General Walsh's office in Washington, and he said, your project, he's told this to my chairman, my board, and 2 of our board members. He said, your project is a dog and we want to get rid of it. Okay? Of course, we talked to Senator Reid, and Senator Reid gets General Walsh's boss in his office, and there's that little thing of confirmation of the new general for the Army, the new chief of engineers. If you want to be confirmed, this project will go forward. I'm not part of these deals, and I'm sure glad that I don't have to be part of those deals. But again, it's just not the way things should work, but that's what has happened. So the Corps has said, we're no longer studying your wonderful flood project. This was, and I failed to mention the level of service of the project is 117 year. How we came up with that, Mark could probably answer that question if somebody really wants to know. Mark, there you go, wave your hand. So if you want to know who Mark is, go talk to him after this talk here. At any rate, they're only going to study a 50-year plan. We're not going to build the 50-year plan, but we're moving forward with the Corps so that we can get a record of decision on the EIS, the NEPA documents. And I think that it becomes very important that we get to that point. Again, the government has only spent $42 million on our study. Now, they have, that's a shame when you think about it. And they have no study, they have no project, especially one that we want to build. However, in speaking with a number of the Corps people out of Division, South Pacific Division, which is San Francisco, and Los Angeles District, they've now shuffled the staff that were working on our project and given us a new set of managers and leaders, and these people are just a godsend. They're absolutely wonderful. And they know when to question things to higher up. They know they can't argue with higher up. It's a military organization. And Pat, since when has the Corps and the Bureau of Reclamation ever worked together? I read Cadillac Desert. I don't know how that ever has happened. But nevertheless, that's what the Corps is doing now. So, in recognition, this is what I inherited basically a year ago. This is where the project was. They said, Jay, would you like to be the leader of this group? I'm glad I'm an engineer because we think differently. It's kind of like we never let these things trouble us too much. You know, it is what it is. So I convinced the board that what we needed to do is do our own recognition. We're going to have to figure out what the plan is we can afford to build if we build it ourselves. If we get no federal dollars appropriated, if the Corps does not come through, we need to start looking at that. And we put all our eggs in the Corps basket, and that's really a wrong thing. There's a lesson learned, and it's on my last slide. We have to reformulate what we can do and realistically understand that. To do that, I had to sell them the notion that we have not only a problem with our flood fees, because we have a problem with the acceptability from our agency stakeholders We have also to do some engineering because we don't know what we can do. We cannot trust the Corps' estimate. The $1.56 billion estimate is an estimate done for the Corps for federal authorization. It is not what it would cost to build our project. We know that, the Corps knows that. It's okay, they do that for their authorization project, so they don't have to go back to Congress when they, oh son of a gun, we screwed up and we need to increase dollars a little bit more. Federal government doesn't like you to do that sort of thing. And then we would also have to maintain, so in other words, we weren't just watching the Corps timeline, we're now watching a series of timelines that we were also managing ourselves. I gave this as a strategy to, I don't expect you to read it, but it's a lot of pretty colors. Politicians love colors. They can read that. It works so much better. As an engineer, I'd rather see a Microsoft project. I can read the dates and start. This just worked so well. There are our three timelines. There's our rates timeline, there's our stakeholder timeline, and there's our engineering timeline. And we're going to spend all the money we have. And I made sure that we spent everything we had on engineering and rates in order to be able to get where we needed to be. Because at the end here is 2016, 2017 is when the flood fees actually take place. We're going to go through what they call a judicial review. That means that we will artificially sue ourselves, or we will get somebody to sue us. Because think of how bad this would be if we issued $100 million in bonds, and then 5 years down the road, some judge said, that's not a fee, it's a tax. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that means, Mr. Director, is that your $100 million of present value dollars that you've already spent on projects, you have to find a new way to fund it. You have to refund all the money that you've collected from your community, and oh, by the way, your community is going to go into bankruptcy. So obviously, and with no successful implementation of flood fees in this country, we've felt it prudent that we would basically argue for this judicial review. And what we intend on getting out of that is a ruling from the Nevada Supreme Court that will at least show that we've done things appropriately. It doesn't mean that we can't get sued in 20 years and lose. It just means that we've taken the necessary steps to do it as right as we could as staff. The board bought this. They said, yeah, we agree with you. We think that you need to do this, and so they're letting me do that. And so we've got an RFQ out on the street right there. We've got another RFP that we're preparing. This is a $5 million engineering study. This is about a $300,000 engineering study. We're going to continue our rate work, and we're going to put it in front of the board and say, there it is, what you asked for, and see if they will bite on that. Again, it's what they asked for. So lessons learned. Just about on time. Interestingly enough, Monday, IT called me and they said, oh, your computer has a virus. It needs to be wiped. You've lost your computer. What? I got to give a talk in Boise in 2 days, and so I'm downloading stuff and taking them home and trying to do this. Be absolutely certain that you will need a parcel before you buy it. We spent $45 million buying land because we thought it would show the community that we were doing something. And what we now have is $15 million worth of property. Sad, true. And it's money that we could have spent doing other things, the engineering that I so wanted to do 3 years ago when I actually started working for these guys. Consensus voting, don't. They held up my contract for 9 months because one guy wanted to extort money out of the flood project. They wanted to get money from the flood project to their city. One person, that's all it took. And they voted no. And the newspapers hounded them, everybody hounded them, it didn't matter. So just don't ever do consensus voting. And understand this, you guys that write motions for public bodies, when you write a motion for a public body in a non-consensus, it's entirely different when you write the same motion in a consensus-based deal, because it just goes into, I'm not even going to go there. I've already cut it into I set a 40-minute time limit for myself on this. A tax is the best funding option, but a fee is easier to sell. Why? Because people say, well, you're the one that's using it, you're the one that's benefiting, therefore you're the one that's paying the fee. Tax is easy to do, state legislature, but in this particular economy, with the mayor mentioned the Tea Party folks out there, it's hard to get a tax even today, but it's even harder to do a fee no matter what a tax does. Consider carefully the option to partner with the Corps. That is not saying that don't partner with the Corps. Make sure if you do partner with the Corps, you are entering the process with your eyes wide open. It takes a whole lot longer to build a project with the Corps. The chief of engineering for SAFCA, which is Sacramento Area Flood Control Authority, it's another JPA like ours, Joint Powers Authority. We're formed by legal agreement, not by state legislature. The chief of the engineer said, or chief of the engineering department for SAFCA, he was talking to me, I don't know, about 6 to 8 months ago, and he said, we don't use the Corps anymore. And it's very difficult. You have to make sure that it's a good fit. And there's ways to do that, and I don't have time to go into it. But you test the political climate, be prepared for the delay associated with the study and funding allocation. Remember, Napa, good example of a Corps project. They got 10 years into their project, and the Corps made them recalculate their BC ratio, and their BC ratio went down below 1, no more allocation. They're mid-construction, no more work, no more money. So they are working and wrestling with that issue. Again, if you have a marginal project like ours, that is a possibility, and you need to make sure that that's not a problem. Don't let your eyes be bigger than your stomach. We certainly did. We listened to Napa. Napa told us put everything in it that you could possibly put in it. And now we're sitting here with a project that can't be built, and it's impossible to build it. And we're now going back and looking at what can we build to protect, at least get the flood component taken care of. Restoration is a hugely worthy goal, and so is recreation. But at the end of the day, if we can only afford $500 million in our flood project, the flood risk management part of our project costs $500 million, what are you going to do? That's what our board, that's what they do. They make those decisions. I don't. But I can tell them, this is what you've got to choose from. Problem is, they thought they had different options than they did. Again, I inherited those as well. Build flexibility into your schedule. We did that with the schedule that we have given to our board. We have a dual process going. We can follow the Corps process. We have milestones to check where we are. We do it ourselves, our own process, and we have milestones to check how we're doing there. And the notion is you don't want to lose sight of the ultimate goal, but you want to build in as much flexibility as you can. Example I always give is you've got a street at the end of a cul-de-sac or end of a road that's not finished, and you put a manhole there. Do you put a stub out on the other side so you don't have to break into the manhole when you can reconnect the sewer line further on down? Of course you do. It costs you peanuts to put it in when you're installing the manhole the first time. It costs you a lot more money to have to replace the manhole to put in a new sewer line because you got to puncture a hole in a facility. So the idea is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Do not think that you're going to do it this way or that way. Always explore multi-pronged approaches. 1, 2, 3, 4, as many as you can afford to deal with. And with that, I will say that new ideas are critical to success, but not all new ideas are good ones. This is exactly what you think it is, a twin-story outhouse in back of a hotel in Dayton. Again, the idea is not all ideas are good ones. And that's on the road to Whitney. I said that in another caption there. I don't want to wax too poetic here, but my caption on this one was, when you start on a path, you're pretty much obligated to stick it out and do the whole thing. Don't switch horses, but build your path so there's enough places to get to where you want to go. And with that, I'll entertain questions. No, one in the very back.
Okay, this may be an unfair question, but how much real estate could you have purchased, or how many flood easements could you have purchased to conserve open space with $424 million of planning monies and $1.5 billion of construction costs?
Let me give you the figure straight. The planning has been $42 million spent by the federal government. We haven't spent any on planning yet. We're going to start planning, and that's the engineering that I was talking about. The money that we have spent, we spent $45 million on property purchases. We bought lands and farms and ranches that were adjacent to the flood project because we thought we would need them. All along, the Corps is saying, don't do that. Don't do that. That's not a good idea to do that. Don't do that. They weren't saying it very loud, but they were saying it. And I couldn't understand why we were buying it either. And we paid 2007, 2006 rates for property. The first day on the day of the former director spent $14 million on a piece of property that right now is not even worth $4 million. So how much we could have bought for $45 million? We could have bought a lot of open space. However, that 1/8 cent sales tax would not buy open space. We would have to buy something that would be specifically for the flood project. Therefore, purchasing adjacent lands to the river, knowing that we were going to terrace that section, we could buy. But we couldn't buy land that's out in the area that looks like it's a pristine piece of property and everybody agrees it'd be a wonderful thing to do. We couldn't use the money for that. And if we could have used our money for doing our own planning studies, I could have got this thing planned in $20 million bucks, easy, maybe 15, and then moved out on that. At least gotten a NEPA document, but.
Sounds like you needed to call Senator Reid.
Well, we did, and we have, and like I say, I inherited this mess. And so we've tried to turn it around as much as we can, and that's by changing strategies, changing where we're spending our money, looking at all the options that we have, and trying to go out with an approach that allows us to, well, we can change here if this happens, and we can move and connect it there, and it becomes a strategy session. But I mean, I'm all for buying open space. I was on the open space committee. My hometown is actually Carson City. So, and I was on that committee for a while as well. We had another question?
Yeah, your whole project seems to be focused on floodplain management and morphing the floodplain to allow the water to safely get through town. It looks like you didn't look at storage at all. Was storage just so out of the question that it wasn't worth looking at?
We've got two problems with storage. One, we have a reservoir. I didn't even bring up, but there's a core reservoir that's leaking. It's called Martis Reservoir. It's right outside of Truckee. That accounts for a couple of thousand CFS on peak flows. If that thing goes, we're in a world of hurt. Now, if they remove that existing facility, then the Corps is going to be obligated to come up with money for mitigation. If not, now the other thing, we also looked for upstream storage. They looked at every particular point, and you know the probability of getting a dam built these days, highly unlikely. So the only thing that we could do is try to preserve as much of the storage we had in the Truckee Meadows area, that big blue area that you saw on the slide. Try to preserve as much as possible, hence the UNR property. And I'm sure you guys wouldn't mind flooding UNR either. So, but the notion is that's ag experimental land. It's good for holding floodwaters, momentarily.
Let's. Jay's going to be in the next talk, and there'll be opportunities for Q&A then. So just so we can keep on schedule, let's go ahead and take it's a 15-minute break. So we'll meet about 10:02. And then he'll be part of the next panel, and so there'll be opportunities as well. Thank you.